how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. I'm here with Fabian Nicieza. Did I come close?
Yeah, you did it perfectly, and you just took your time. You went syllable at a time. That was very well done.
Oh my
You
God, I
you were
was so
you were
scared.
so nervous. You were so nervous
I was
while
so
you were
nervous.
doing
And
it.
this is the game I was going to play. This is my last name, and when I mispronounced your last name, I was going to say, "Okay, you can mispronounce my last name."
I'm just gonna go with Bois.
That's close enough. Bua. So I was going to say,
Bois.
I thought I was going to mispronounce your name, and then I was going to give you a chance to mispronounce mine. And
What
then
nationality is that?
it is actually Italian, but
Okay.
my grandfather's from Sicily. But when we looked it up, apparently there's a town in Spain where the name is popular, and it has to do with like ranchers, bovines and
Okay.
everything. And of course, my grandfather has to be like, yeah, he was a sea captain. I was like,
Yeah.
he couldn't have been a guy who got keyhailed and thrown off the boat. He had to be a sea captain. But that's the arrogance of grandpa. And forgive me, I got a cough that I just cannot seem to shake. So forgive me if I cough. So let's talk comic books. We're just two guys talking comic books over here. I'm very excited. As I was saying before we went live, I didn't realize it until I went back and I looked. I've been buying your comics since your very first comic, DP7, back in 1985, right?
Very first comic was actually Cyforce, which was
Cyforce. Again, I
Cyforce
got
number
your name
9.
right, so I can't bet 1,000.
Mark Grunwald wrote DP7 for its entire run. I sold an inventory story to Marvel that was published in 1987, and that was Cyforce number 9. And another inventory story printed as Cyforce number 13. Then I was offered the monthly book with issue 16. So I became a monthly writer for Marvel pretty quickly, a little faster than I probably should have, based on my lack of experience. But I started my monthly book. I think early 1988 was when I started having the monthly book, and then I just kept doing stuff on the side, other inventory stories, mostly for superhero books like Daredevil and Doctor Strange and Iron Man. Inventory stories were completely finished issues that sat in a drawer until the editor needed them. And because back then Marvel was pretty strict about its schedule, because if you missed your shipping, you missed your newsstand slot, and if you missed your newsstand slot, you're missing out on anywhere from 50 to 150,000 copies in sales. Back then. So every editor had to have a finished inventory story, and once it got slotted, they darn well better have another one in the pipeline. So it was a really good opportunity for people who didn't have regular books, for people who worked in the office like I did, who were trying to be writers and trying to sell their stuff, assistant editors. It was a good opportunity for them to see if they could write or not. So it was pretty good, because it was a good way to basically learn the ropes, get my feet wet, work for a variety of editors, have them begin to know my work and begin to like what I was doing as a writer. I was already on staff 9 to 5 as the advertising manager, so I interacted with editorial on a daily basis. And got along pretty well with everybody. So it was a good opportunity for me to fold what I did as part of my 9 to 5 to what I was hoping to do as a writer.
Oh, cool. So now you beg the question: do you have inventory stories that are still in a drawer someplace?
Not that I'm aware of. No, the last one that actually was real was I did a Thunderbolts inventory story while I was the monthly writer of Thunderbolts. This was in the early aughts, and it was Nomad centric. It was because I had made Jack Monroe Nomad Scourge. Tom Brevoort asked me to do an inventory story, and I did a solo issue of Nomad post the Scourge storyline in Thunderbolts, and it sat in a drawer for quite a while. And then Marvel was clearing out all of any and all excess inventory they might have had, and they published it as part of some series of issues they did called Marvel Vault. And basically Marvel Vault, I guess, is what Geraldo Rivera would have had if he had actually found anything inside Al Capone's vault.
And we open up the vault. Hey, it's some Fabian stories.
It's a Nomad story by Fabian and Derek O'Quine, and it was good. That was the last one. I don't think they do inventory stories anymore. I don't think they worry as much about shipping schedules as they used to.
Well, there's no more newsstands, so why bother?
Well, other than the fact that you're supposed to be shipping your book monthly, other than that, nothing,
Yeah.
I guess.
So now you made me think of another. Do you get paid when you submit the inventory, or do you get paid when it gets published?
No, you get paid. Marvel and DC operate under a page rate basis, so you get paid when you submit the work.
Okay.
So if you're doing a full script, you voucher for your full script. So right now, on average, that's 20 pages.
Oh, okay.
If you're working plot first, like we used to, you voucher for your plot, and you're getting 1/3 of your payment. And then when you do the script, you get 2/3 of your payment. But it doesn't. Once you do your discipline, you're not beholden to wait for someone else's discipline. So
Oh,
once
okay.
I
Well,
write it, I don't have to wait for the letterer to letter it, and I don't have to wait for the colorist to
Here's
color it.
slip in another inventory. Here's another one, just in case. Here's another one, just in case. Christmas is coming. Here's another one.
You know what? Honestly, back then. It was a really good way to learn the craft. Quite frankly, doing self-contained stories is not easy, and too few writers have to do that nowadays. And I think it's actually to the detriment of a lot of the writers who currently work in comics. I think if you ask them to tell a 20-page story, most of them would choke right now because they wouldn't know how to do it. They're so used to doing 5-issue arcs for trade paperbacks that the way to plot and break down a story has changed drastically from what it used to be.
Yeah, I'm
And
a
in
big
some cases that's good, mind you, but in other cases it's not.
right. There's nothing wrong with the long epic story. I mean, geez, I remember Fantastic Four when they fought the scrolls that lasted 2 years. And I
Yeah, but
you
that
know,
you're talking about a gajillion years ago. The
yeah, yeah.
problem with
Look at
how
my beard. I
the way
read
I
this a
see it,
billion years ago.
the problem with the way it's being done now is that you're not telling 6 issues worth of story.
You're anticipating me. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
telling 1 or 2 issues worth of story that you're stretching out over 6 issues.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
the entire approach to pacing and storytelling changed dramatically in the early aughts, especially at Marvel, and it really became far more static and scene driven, static and talking centric. So too much of it was people talking about what they did rather than showing you what they did, or
Yeah,
talking about what they're going to do rather than actually showing the reader the characters doing it.
absolutely. I mean, I could take any issue of your New Warriors and open it up, and there's a billion things going on, and a billion exciting things going on, and there's character development, and it seems like that kind of stuff. Like now, I could pick up I don't want to go negative, right? I'm not here to hurt
Yeah,
anybody's.
because I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
but I
think
could
that
pick up
it's
a new
different. It's a different approach to storytelling for a different audience. The storytelling we did back then was really aimed facetiously. We were told to aim our comics 8 to 80 in terms of our demographic, and that
right.
was an exaggerated point that was being made, which is to say that you could have a kid reading this
Oh,
from a
absolutely.
newsstand, or you can have a 50-year-old who's been reading comics for the last 30 years, right?
Well,
now
you're looking
now
at
it's
that guy.
almost exclusively the 50-year-olds, though, now that the books are being written for, the books are being sold to the, quite frankly, on obviously the great detriment of the industry. And when I say the industry, I don't mean the comics industry, I mean Marvel and DC, because the publishing industry as a whole is very, very strong. The superhero industry is not.
Right. When you said because I got those comics, I've been collecting comics since 1974. I'm gonna say, and I was an 8-year-old, like you said, enjoying Fantastic Four and X-Men, and then later on your New Warriors and things like that. And now I'm a 50-year-old man, and I go back and I reread them, and I enjoy them. First off, for the nostalgia, for the fun and everything, but I
Yeah.
also pick up stuff that I didn't pick up before. It seemed like with Bugs Bunny, you know,
Yeah.
you
There, if you're doing your job right, there, like the people who made Bugs Bunny did,
correct, yeah,
you're going to get a different reaction from something, whether you're 8 years old, 16 years old, 30 years old. The older you get, the more experience you have. Hopefully, the more knowledge you gather. So certain things that may have gone over your head when you were 8 or 10, or even
absolutely.
14, don't go over your head. By the same token, I also read a lot of older stuff, and I read a lot of current stuff too. And I don't ever try to equate the two, because it's kind of silly in a lot of ways. It's like equating a black and white TV show to a full VFX, Disney Plus Star Wars show, and looking at the special effects of the Star Wars show compared to Buck Rogers in 1947. They're very different things. They're very different. They had very different audiences. They had very different requirements. The characters are the same, but the way the story is being told and who the story is being told to is very different. And I can read a Shooter Perez Avengers issue and appreciate it tremendously for what it was and what it meant to me when I was 15 years old. By the same token, I think I just read an issue yesterday on digital of Rick Remender's Uncanny Avengers, with Daniel Acuna's artwork, and I thought it was a really, really interesting, cool issue that I was reading. So I just try very hard not to equate the two. I think it's like a binary fallacy that a lot of the audience wants to create for themselves and for others. I accept it. They're very different. Mind you, if I try to write a self-contained story in 20 pages now, which used to be something I could do with my eyes closed in my sleep 30 years ago, it's a lot harder for me to do it now, because the last 15, 20 years, most of the comics I've written have had more of a tendency to be like what is being done as the standard, and that stretches things out. It has a lot more scenes of character interaction rather than six page fight scenes. You don't get anymore. You get a double page spread that shows you what happened 5 seconds after the fight is over, and then they talk about the fight. So that's kind of what the audience actually wants, so that's what you got to give them.
I don't know, I'm not going to call you out on that when you're the professional, but I don't think the audience wants to, the sales are plummeting, so maybe.
Yeah, but that's a fallacy. Again, the audience the audience wants, if they continue to buy a book, whether they're 55 years old or 35 years old, whether they've read a book for 5 minutes or whether they've read a book for 15, 20 years, if you're buying it, that's what you want. Because if you don't want it, you shouldn't be buying it. So that's on you, not on anyone else.
Well,
okay.
That's just it. I quit.
And the other thing is that the reason sales have gone down is because they're not selling comics to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds anymore.
I agree with
and
that.
They haven't for 20 years. So you can't use that as a barometer. 100%. You can't use how they make the comics now as a barometer for why they're not selling well, because again, it's a false analogy. The reason they're not selling as much is because the outlets in which they sell have been compromised and limited. And you also, everybody who says that always really comfortably fails to take into account what are hardcover and trade paperback sales. Okay, so if you combine hardcover and trade paperback sales with monthly standard format comic book sales, how close are you approximating those numbers to what in 1992 or 1988 used to be direct market shops and newsstands, and those were our only two outlets, really, right? So we didn't have trade paperbacks back then that sold to the numbers that they sell now, right?
That was a game changer when trade paperbacks came out. I remember that was like the great debate: do I still get floppies, or do I get? But I get the floppies.
The real interesting aspect of that is that when what you're talking about, when trade paperbacks first came out in the 80s and really started to pick up a little more steam in the 90s, the vast majority of those were selling in comic book shops. It wasn't until bookstores started carrying them in the aughts, because manga was starting to sell so well in bookstores that they started to carry other stuff. That's when those numbers increased. There was a point, I don't know when it was, where Marvel's sales of published material was basically split 50-50 between standard format comics and trade paperbacks and hardcovers. So when you look at those numbers, the easiest thing to say is, well, your standard format comics aren't selling as well as they should be, and that's the truth. They weren't. But at the end of the day, though, you still look at a publishing program as the totality of everything they do. You don't just look at it as one thing or another, because a publishing program is all the things you do as an aggregate. And they were selling a lot of trade paperbacks. So yeah, standard format comics aren't selling as well as they used to. The outlets in which you can actually buy them have dwindled in comparison to what it used to be.
Yeah,
In
that's a
the early 90s, there were 10,000 comic book shops. Now there's like 2,500 or 3,000,
I
right?
don't know the
So
exact number, but yes, yeah.
well, yeah, of course you're not going to sell as many. Back in the early 90s, X-Men would sell 125, 150,000 copies on the newsstand, right? New Warriors was selling 60 to 80,000 copies on the newsstand, right? So where are those numbers now? They're gone. They disappeared.
Yeah.
You know?
I
So
think I think it was a shame that we the comics kind of pulled away from the newsstand. I always thought that the newsstand was like the impulse buy. Mom, buy me that comic book.
it
Get
was.
this. And then
It was the entry for
entry,
almost the totality of an entire audience. But then comic book shops started selling more and more. The numbers, and I was there in the
they were
office I was
non-returnables.
there while it was happening, mind you. Okay, so the truth of the matter is that from a corporation standpoint, from a company's fiscal responsibility standpoint, they're not thinking about 20 years down the road. They're looking at how much more money they make per comic off of the direct market than how much money they make per comic on newsstand. And
Right.
it wasn't even close, right? The profits, when the sales were about even, you'd sell more in the newsstand than direct market, even though you're starting to get a higher and higher profit. Once direct market started outselling newsstand by a tremendous amount, there was no incentive for the companies to
Right.
stay on the
And
newsstand.
remember, the newsstand was returnable, and in the
Yeah,
direct
yeah, yeah,
market, what you
yeah.
sold to the comic stores, they kept.
Yes, yeah,
So
and
I understand.
it's pretty much
I'm
still
not a
that same way to this day, right?
right. I understand. If I was Marvel and DC, I would do the same thing. But hindsight is 2020. Yeah,
And then, no, look, everyone knew that unless new venues were found to sell product to young readers, that this was going to hurt. That there was a philosophy in the office back then, mostly among accounting people and the higher ups, because they they like to pretend they paint a rosier picture in order to maximize what the number flow looks like right now. That they were of the opinion that the direct market would be where younger people would come in to buy comics, because there were going to be so many stores that you wouldn't need the 7-Elevens and things like that, right? And the corner drugstores and
I
stuff
wanted to
like
open
that.
up my own comic book store so bad. That was like my dream as a teenager. I'm gonna have my own comic book store. I thought I was gonna set up a cot in the back and live there. You know what I mean? That's you know what I mean? To
You
be a
could
young kid, how cool would that be? Come on, honey,
God,
bring some chick over to my cot in the back of the comic
you
book
couldn't
store.
pay me to want to run a comic book shop.
And that, now I look back at it, I'm like, oh man, the folly of youth.
No way. No,
I
it
know,
is,
I
it
know.
is, it is a grind of a responsibility and a
And then
job
you
to have a
see
retail
that
store.
character on The Big Bang Theory, and you're like, whew, I got a real
Yeah.
job. So also, for those who may not know, you're also the co-creator of Deadpool, and that guy's kind of popular, huh?
Yeah, yeah, he's done okay. He
Yeah, he's
he
done
he
okay.
he gets me a check or two every year or so. All good. Yeah, he's a popular character.
Yeah,
That's more than enough said about Deadpool.
yeah. I mean, I thought out of all the Marvel movies, he made 2 movies and did pretty good, And now there's a third movie come out that people are excited about. How do you feel about him being compressed into the MCU? I assume that's
I honestly don't really care that much one way or the other. I worry that it could too easily become a parody of itself and a joke. I prefer Deadpool to be placed in a regular story in which he is the outlier. When the whole thing is an outlier, then it just becomes a little too crazy. So I'm wary about them overstuffing it. But by the same token, since I am neither being paid to write the movie, to star in the movie, to direct the movie, or to distribute the movie, or to market the movie, it doesn't matter to me
Oh,
because I have no
you,
involvement in it.
oh, really?
I'll sit my ass in the theater. I'll watch it along with everyone else, and I will like it or not like it based on what I see on screen. You
Oh,
know, John, the ultimate answer after all this time and all the same questions about Deadpool again and again, the real thing that boils down to is I just want to make sure I get my check from Marvel. That's all.
that's
If I
good.
get my check
Oh,
from Marvel,
that's a real
then
world concern.
it doesn't make a difference one way or the other because it's none of it is anything I have any control over. Do I want it to do well? Of course I do because it serves a good purpose for me. It means they might make more movies. That's more checks. So it's all fine. It's all well and good. But when you've been writing for 35 years, you can't it'd be really foolish of you to worry that much about something you have absolutely zero creative involvement in, you know?
I feel that way about lots of things that I could be worried about right now. I'm like, you know what? That's not my concern. Why?
Yeah.
So you're wiser.
I would
I,
I want it to be good because that means I will enjoy it. That's ultimately the first and foremost thing. I want to enjoy my movie going experience. The other reason I want it to be good is because that means it might do better at the box office, and that means there's possibly a likelihood they'll do another one, and that's fine with me because I get a bigger check when they make a movie.
all right, all right, all right. Uh, I was going to ask you, but I guess you don't like because Ryan Reynolds is a super fan and he pretty much saved that movie. I thought didn't he like change some things behind the scenes for the first Deadpool movie? It was going in a direction he thought was bad. And
No,
see, I was
he,
going to ask you. I figured
he,
go right to the horse's mouth here.
look, I wrote a panel in issue number 2 of Cable and Deadpool number 2 that came out in 2004, where the character described himself as looking like Ryan Reynolds crossed with a Shar Pei. Ryan Reynolds found out about that and became more interested in the character. I think he was familiar with the character, but not familiar with the
Okay.
character. And he became immersed in the character to the point where he wanted to be the character on screen and thought it would be a really good opportunity for him. And he worked his way into the Wolverine movie to appear in it in the hopes that that would serve as the setup for a spin-off. And the movie wasn't well received, and the way they portrayed Deadpool was not well received, although he was not happy about that.
Yeah.
But they had a script written for Deadpool, and it sat on a shelf in Fox in a closet for 5 years. They weren't going to make it because the Wolverine movie hadn't been that well received. And finally, eventually, through a variety of smart internet releases of information that they'd been sitting on, they generated a lot of interest in the the opportunity to make this movie. And Marvel's cinematic universe movies coming out from Disney had really obviously gained a tremendous foothold by then. And Fox said, okay, we can make this, but if you want to make it the way you want to make it, which was an R-rated movie, the budget's going to be really low. You're going to have to take a salary cut, et cetera, et cetera. So the budget was really low, and he took back end instead of front end, and he ended up buying a phone company,
Yeah, he didn't do
a
too bad
gym
for himself.
company, and a soccer team. So I think Ryan is an incredibly
Yeah,
intelligent
he did.
guy and
Yeah,
knows how to bet on himself and win. So
yeah,
that's
good for him.
ultimately what it amounted to.
Good for him. So they got you coming back to Marvel, and you're writing again.
Okay, yeah, I don't. I've had that a few times. I got to be honest, John. It throws me off a bit. That
I'm sorry.
there hasn't been a year where I haven't done something for
Okay,
Marvel.
okay,
For the last 10 years, roughly. I mean, once my 5-year contract with DC ended, like in 2013, I've always done something or
okay.
other for Marvel.
I
Not a lot. I don't pitch them. They offer me stuff. Sometimes they offer me a bunch of stuff.
Oh,
in a
good.
year. Sometimes they only offer me one or two things in a year. Sometimes I say yes, sometimes I say no. I've done a lot of 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I was doing a lot of custom comics work for them because my friend of mine was the editor there, and they're really hard to do. So I'm stupid and I like a challenge. And custom comics are things you never really see. They're corporate partnership jobs, you know.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you what that was. Okay.
Yeah, and they don't sell in stores or anything like that. They're usually done as promotional giveaways or corporate event giveaways and things like that. But look, I wrote the Juggernaut miniseries a couple of years
Right.
ago. I've written two different Marvel Unlimited series. The Cable miniseries just came up. Like in
Right.
1 week. In 1 week, they asked me to do two things. They asked
Oh,
me to do
good, good, good.
the Cable miniseries, and um, they asked me to do a giant size issue, and I had my choice of two different ones they offered me, and I chose the Fantastic Four one. So I'm doing a giant size Fantastic Four number
Oh,
one,
that is awesome.
which
I'm a
is
big fan.
supposed to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the giant size issues from the early 70s. But I got a bone to pick with them because they're not giant size issues. It's a standard format 20-page story for me with a reprint backup. So it's going to be a nice package, but when I bought those original giant size issues back in the 70s, and I got them all in the basement right now, they were 36-page stories. They were
Yeah.
big, and I sure could have used those extra 16 pages on my Fantastic Four story, because talk about trying to do a one and done. I think I tried to bite off more than I could chew when I wrote that script.
Marcus is asking, do you write full script or do you do Marvel method?
I pretty Marvel method now is full script, unfortunately.
Okay.
Um, I have written pretty much everything full script since around 2004. Cable Deadpool was a full script book because the editor wanted it that way, because the editor in chief wanted it that way, because the president of the company wanted it that way. For the most part, everyone works full script now. Very few writers work plot only. There's a couple times I've done a plot for Marvel here or there. I did a few issues of some DC stuff several years ago when they did those Convergence two issue stories when the company was moving from New York to LA and they needed a 2 month break. They had basically Marie Javins, before she became the editor in chief there, was hired to package like a whole bunch of comics that were going to be two-part stories that were going to be published while the company was moving, so that the regular editorial cycle wouldn't be interrupted or disrupted.
Right.
And I wrote three of those: Superboy, Titans, and Justice League of America, Detroit. And I loved writing all six of those issues. They were a lot of fun. I wrote all of those plot first.
Okay.
But and I prefer plot first, quite frankly. I still do to this day. I'm at the point now where I've been doing this for 35 years, 36 years, and the first 15, 16 years was plot first, and the second half um has been full script. So I got a pretty fair gauge of which I prefer personally, and I prefer plot first because I like giving the artist the freedom to tell the story visually, and I like reacting to what I get from them,
Okay.
and dialoguing to what I get from them. I feel full scripts really restrict the artist's visual interpretation of the story. I think it really slows stories down. I think it is a writer's tool, and that's why you get so many writer-driven comics now, which is a lot of talking heads and a lot of staring out windows and on rainy days, and that starts to just bore me quite a bit. So as a writer, that even bores me. And conversely, when I'm working full script, I get the art back. Like just today, I did my final lettering pass for Cable number one. So I got all 22 pages of Scott Eaton's pencils, and I'm going through my original full script, and I'm tailoring it to the pencils now. Oh, I don't have enough room there. I got to cut this line down. I'm going to split this line up into two balloons. Let's move this caption up. So you start jiggering the script a little bit.
You just answered my next question. When you do it
Yeah,
full script and your writer gives you, I guess you do still have to juggle things around a bit.
you do. And unfortunately, though, once again, it it's become a tool by which writers have chosen to do a lot of rewriting, which forces a letterer to have to re-letter sometimes. They're doing that too. They get the lettering pass from the letterer, and then they go, "Oh, I'm going to change a whole bunch of stuff." Look, I was an editor. I've been a writer forever, but I was also an editor. If I were an editor nowadays, I'd probably be smacking every writer I had in the head every single day. Um, writers right now are really annoying me in comics.
Well, yeah.
There is far too much self-importance that they are placing on themselves, and unfortunately the readers are doing that as well, which is a detriment to the perception of how comics are actually made. um,
When
so so
I
so
took a
yeah,
writing
that
class.
look, there'll be more tweaking on cable number one when I get the lettering, because I may have misjudged a balloon or two here in terms of the space. Don't take into account, in the old days I had 11 by 17 photocopies of the full art page, so it gave you a much cleaner look at the art. I'm doing it on my laptop right now. There's no way in hell I'm printing out 20 pages a month on
Yeah.
large pieces of paper anymore. I'm too old for that crap. So I'm looking at it on my laptop, and I'm seeing the page, and you're seeing it in a diminished size. So your perspective of how much is fitting or not fitting in
I
a
never thought
balloon
about that.
is altered, and then you get full pencils back and you look at it in comparison to your full script. And in the old days, you you know you, you wouldn't get as much detail in your panels as you do nowadays. So I know that every time I have too much copy, or if I'm adding dialogue, I'm covering up the work that an artist took an hour, 2 hours to do,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and unfortunately, too many artists nowadays are filling their panels corner to corner with detail, which is incredibly annoying. They don't have to do that, and not leaving a lot of breathing space on panels. So then, as a writer, you're sitting here fighting how much you want to say versus how much of the art you might not want to cover up,
Wow. So yeah, I was saying before that I took a writing class, and one of the things my writing teacher said is, if you want to be a writer, you have to be a little arrogant. so, when you said the arrogant writers, I'm like, yeah, show me a writer, and I'll show you somebody who's arrogant. Because you're thinking somebody wants to pay to read the stuff that I'm making up, right? So there is that.
Yeah, I feel quite comfortable feeling that way when it comes to the prose I'm writing. I think being arrogant as a comic book writer is ridiculously masturbatory, and to the point where you just masturbated and you're shouting to the world that you had sex. Listen, there is no comic book without artwork.
Right.
Period.
Yeah,
No one is going to buy a book filled with empty panels and word balloons on it. Okay. Conversely, though, plenty of people will buy a comic book that has nothing but art in it and no dialogue. That experiment has been done plenty of times, and it's
yeah,
worked just
yeah.
fine.
Few times there's some successful wordless
Comic books
comics.
are a visual medium. To
Pardon
pretend
my
that it
coughing.
to pretend that it's not a visual medium first and foremost is ludicrous, because it is. What it's supposed to be is a smart synthesis of words and pictures. But the "and" in there is really important. Words and pictures, not one or the
Absolutely,
other.
100%.
So the arrogance of writers, like I said, John, if I were an editor right now, I'd be smacking a lot of writers in the back of the head on a monthly basis,
Yeah,
because I think there are way too many of them. Generationally speaking, the subsequent generations that came after me, that there's a way too much self-importance on a lot of their parts.
that's fair enough. I cannot disagree with the word you just said. You were talking earlier about, you said, unfortunately, the comic book audience, we used to write from 8 to 80, and again, I could read older stuff and then pick up on it. And is this a conscious thing? Is this just a natural evolution that we kind of just neglected younger and younger readers? Like, is
It's a
this,
natural evolution.
it is
It's a natural evolution and a byproduct of losing out on the venues like we talked about,
right,
where
the
the
no
young people were,
newsstands.
were buying the books, but just as importantly, comic book retail shops serving a specific clientele, often not trying to get new audiences into their stores, often not making their stores comfortable or welcoming to new audiences, much less female readers or things like that. And as a result, they became it became a hamster in a wheel, and it's very self-serving. So as you get older, you're 55 now, you were buying comics when you were 45, you were buying comics when you're 35, you're going to the same store. It's incredibly cyclical. You're a hamster on a wheel, and you're not running a marathon, you're spinning in circles. And ultimately that's what we did to ourselves. I can say all this slightly objectively because I've really been out of the comic book industry for 20 years. I'm not really in the comic book industry. It hasn't been my main source of income. It hasn't been my sole source of income in 20, almost 25 years. It hasn't been my only or my main source of income in well over 10, 15 years. I do 4 or 5 different things a year,
Okay.
comics for the most part. It used to be one half, then it was one third, then it was one quarter. Now the last 5 years, it's been a fifth of my yearly income. So I'm not in the office. I don't know what goes on in the office. I talk to some people sometimes, but not that much. What the office environment is like now is nothing compared to what it was like when I was there. I could tell you chapter and verse what was happening in the industry from 1985 to 1995, even maybe a little bit up to my acclaim years, 1998. But after that, I really kind of just, I just made it a part of my professional life, not the main driver of my professional life
Now,
in the least.
I'm trying to say this as delicate as possible. Was that your choice to move your income away from?
Yeah, yeah. Look, it was I made it my choice before the choice was made for me. I was smart enough to know that there's no way that I would be able to maintain a 4 book a month or 5 book a month cycle as a writer, because no one did. And why would I think I could? And
Okay.
and and the only way you can actually earn enough of a living as a comic book writer when you don't have sales on your comics anymore, but giving you incentive money, royalty checks based on sales of the book. Once the sales drop below a certain point where you're not really making incentives, then you need to be doing 4 or 5 books a month just to be able to pay your mortgage, to plan for your kids' college education, your car payments, your taxes, all of that stuff, right? Who's going to be able to do 4 or 5 books a month? How many writers actually have in the last 20 years? Not many, right?
Yeah.
And when I say 4 or 5 a month, I mean consistently 4 or 5 a month. I don't mean a month where you have 4 books out. A lot of writers can say that, but
Right.
but to have 4 or 5 books a month for 2, 3, 4 years consecutively, that doesn't
Who
happen.
was the last
So
person? Was that Jack Kirby? Was the last person to do that? I'm trying to
no, I
think.
think I was writing 6 monthly books
Oh,
with
I'm
a
just thinking of
full-time
an artist.
job in
Jeez.
1992.
Yeah.
um, but the truth of the matter is that I always wanted to try different things, and if I didn't, if I only did one kind of thing, I would, not only would it be damaging to my potential in my career, but it would drive me crazy if I was only doing one thing. If I was only writing comic books, it would have driven me nuts, because then I would have always been chasing the next job in comics, worrying about who was writing what, worrying about what was happening with which character. It just wasn't worth it to me. So I always like writing comics. Marvel calls me up and says, "Do you want to do a cable miniseries?" I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun. Okay." Marvel calls me up and says, "Do you want to do XYZ?" And it doesn't sound that interesting. So I go, "Nah, it's okay,
Okay.
thanks."
Well,
You
that's good.
know,
Yeah.
but it's been that way for me for a very, very long time. So I don't think of it as an outlier. I just think of it as the way I've been. I got a 2 book contract to write 2 novels for Putnam Publishing.
Oh,
Those 2 books alone paid me more than I've made in comics since 1998, 97.
wow.
You
Good for
know,
So
so
that leads us to Dark Alchemy. He was asking, how do you create stories? How do you keep the content new and fresh? And there you go. You like to jump around.
yeah, I don't read current stuff. When
Oh,
as it comes out, I read a lot of newer stuff, but usually it's a year or two down the road, and I almost always read it digitally. Like right now, I'm reading the trade paperback run of Rick Remender's Uncanny Avengers. That's like what, at least 5 years old now, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
Um,
I
yeah, I'm
just
reading
read
that
that
now, and
myself.
and right before that, I read the second trade paperback of Tom King and Greg Smallwood's Human Target. miniseries that they did for DC. That's only a year or two old, I think. That's not that old. That just
Yeah,
recently came out. So
yeah,
I,
that's about
I,
a year
I
too.
read stuff digitally, and it's anywhere from 5 years old to a year old. But
So you're
I
still a fan
haven't.
of comics? You still like comic, or is this research for something that you're writing
No,
now?
no, no. It's usually read out of curiosity, interest in what's happening with characters, or interest in what a specific writer or artist might be doing. Um, I don't look I got a library app called Hoopla on my iPad, and that's where I download the comics digitally. My queue is 200, 100 books, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get to all of them because I only read a few a month.
You want to see something? This is my to read pile right over here.
Yeah, see, and that's ludicrous to me. I got to be honest with
I'm a
you.
ludicrous
That
person.
that's like a sign of borderline mental illness on your part.
Well, yeah,
And you bought those comics. You paid money for them, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't. I don't do that anymore. I barely ever spend money on comics anymore. I get them out of the library, or I download them on my
Oh,
digital app.
you haven't begun to plumb the depths of my mental illness. You ready for this? That's my
Yeah,
comic book room.
yeah, that is that. Well, my basement would look like that if it weren't in my basement. I got, I had when I moved from a larger house to the house I'm in now about 9 years ago. I got rid of half of my collection. That was 70 long boxes and another 40 boxes of stuff, and I kept my Marvels. And my Marvels right now is like 50 something long boxes. So I had a lot, I had a lot, but you got to take into account that once I started working at Marvel in '85, I was getting Marvels, DCs, First, Eclipse, all of those we were getting for free, because it was part
Right.
of an exchange program. So I would get the comics for free, and that's kind of how it started to really build up. And also back in the day, Marvel would give you 25 to 50 comp copies of what you wrote,
Oh,
and
cool.
and boy, does that fill up a long box real quick when you're writing 4, 5, 6 books a month. And as I learned when I was weeding through the books and reducing my load to move into the house I'm in now, I had to ask myself real questions of a moral nature, which I thought were going to be difficult to answer, but they proved to be incredibly easy to answer. The question was, does anyone really need 50 copies of Alpha Flight 96? And the answer is no, they do not.
Yeah, I agree.
So I
I
kept
may be
three
crazy, but
copies. I kept 3 copies of everything I wrote back then, and I got rid of the rest.
yeah, I have one copy of every, whatever I collect, I get one copy. I don't get the variant covers and stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, I fully accept I'm not borderline crazy. I'm well over the
Well
finish
over the line,
crazy.
yeah.
I know me. I may be a jerk, but I'm a self-aware jerk. But even that, I'm not going to get 20 copies of anything. I got friends who buys a reading copy. He buys a copy in case a friend wants to borrow his copy, and he buys a copy. You know what I mean? You know. So I understand. Comic book collectors are weird people. And I love them, and I love talking to comic book people. I'm enjoying talking to you. I think it's the greatest thing, you know. The other night I was on a channel. And it was a younger guy, and he was asking me who would win in a fight between Batman and Spider-Man. I was just loving it. I was just loving that stuff, because comic books have been getting too political, and people have been fighting and arguing. And the bottom line is, we're talking about people in spandex outfits, jumping around and shooting laser beams. It's supposed to be fun, and I look at the New Warriors. I reread it recently. I didn't know that you're going to come on my channel. I think I reread the entire series 2 years ago. I got to say, those first 25 issues are outstanding comics that I absolutely love. They are everything that is what comic book should be. Fighting what's his name, Terex the Tamer, and all of this
You had a
stuff.
good run. Had a
You know,
good run. I had very good people to work with.
yeah,
You can't complain too much when your first 50 issues are drawn by Mark Bagley and Derek Robertson. You're in pretty good shape. So
yes,
so
absolutely.
it was a really enjoyable uh, run. To this day, it's still for me my favorite writing assignment that I've
Oh,
ever
really?
had. Yeah, because it meant the most to me. It was the book that made my career, made my bones, And I don't just mean in terms of sales, although its sales the first 2.5 years, 3 years were very strong. It made my career because it was a far better book than anyone thought it was going to be.
It
And
was a
and
it
we
was a
got we got we got full credit for that. My X-Men books were borderline crap to acceptable, and they sold through the roof. So
I would
everyone in the office thought the X-Men were great because they were selling so great. No, that's not the case.
I wouldn't call
One
it
I
crap.
learned real quickly that one doesn't equate with the other. Quality doesn't necessarily equate with quantity, and vice versa. Sometimes the combination is there, but not always.
Uh,
So for me, the New Warriors is the book that proved to Marvel editors that I could write a really good superhero book. It proved to retailers that I could write a book that was going to sell better than they ever thought it was going to sell, and showed increased sales throughout its entire first year plus, which
yes.
doesn't happen very often. First issue sold 126,000 in the direct market. Issue 12 and 13 sold like 250,000 copies in the
Yeah,
direct
I was
market.
working at a comic book store at the time, and it was like the word of mouth in the stores. Like people like, oh, well, I just got back into comics. Yeah, get some New Warriors.
Yeah.
It just came out. We're at issue 3 right now. Yeah, oh wow, a
And
lot. There was a lot of
yeah, and it was a book. What I liked most about it was it was not the audience for that book was not necessarily the same as the audience for X-Men. It was actually leaned a little more toward the audience for Avengers. So the
yes, yes,
people who were
absolutely
reading New Warriors were actually very much a subsect of the general reading whole for Marvel, and they felt very much a part of something that was theirs. It
right.
wasn't a part of X this or that, and the readers to this day that I talk to all the time at conventions always felt like they were part of a secret club, that they were a member of, and
Oh, I know.
they knew the book they were reading was really enjoyable, and they didn't necessarily care that someone else didn't know, and they didn't care that someone else thought their book was crap. They knew it wasn't, so they were
Right.
really enjoying it.
Did the editors let you do whatever you wanted? Like it was one of those
No,
below.
editors never let you do whatever
Well,
they want, and
well,
they
you know what I mean.
shouldn't.
Like was it below the
The
radar?
editors, John, the editor's actual job is to make sure you don't do anything you want to do, because then that means you're probably going to get them fired, right? That I worked really, really well with Danny Fingeroth, the editor, and the way we worked well is by being oil and water, by being having very different approaches to comics, thinking about what comics can and should be, and butting heads constantly
Oh,
about
really?
everything. And that made it a better book because Danny was terrified of losing his job again, and I was terrified of writing a boring comic that wouldn't say anything to a younger audience, which I wanted to say something to, right? So we found a really good way to meet in the middle. And there were things I wanted to do which I couldn't do, and that's fine in hindsight. I wish a couple I could have done, but I understand why I didn't. As it is, I got to do a lot. I got to push I got to push Danny further away from the middle, and he got to pull me back a little toward the middle. And that was a really good
Oh,
dynamic, and it worked out really, really well. Clearly and obviously, it worked out really well for me. It worked out really well for the book. Worked out really well for the readers, and
yeah,
ultimately,
yeah.
it worked out really well for Danny's career because the success he had with New Warriors was one of the main reasons why he was given the Spider-Man titles to edit, and he got the Spider-Man titles to edit in the early 90s.
Oh, that's great. People I've talked to people and they got nothing but nice things to say about Danny Fingeroth. So I got a little nervous when you mentioned that you were butting heads. I was like, oh. So
No, no,
that's good.
Danny. I just saw Danny a couple of weeks ago at a memorial thing for John Romita. Danny was and always will be my friend, and someone I respect
Oh,
tremendously
that's
because
that's
I know
great.
how hard the job he had with me was. I was giving him really good stories, and I was giving him really exciting stories, and I was delivering all my work on time, and I was passionate and I was excited, but I was also incredibly pushy, incredibly arrogant, incredibly indifferent to anyone in my way. and he was older, mature, smarter, wiser, had already been around the block a couple times. So the combination of the two things actually was to the great benefit of the book.
Oh, so let me ask you this. Now let's reverse the roles. Now you're the editor, and you get a young whippersnapper writer like yourself. What would
I
you
would
do?
do the same thing. I would do the same thing to them that Danny did to me. I would work really, really hard to not temper their ideas and not temper the things they wanted to say, but make them understand those things within a greater picture, a greater context. Make them understand that that what they write now may have an effect on something 20 years from now, and what they write now is the result of something that was done 20 years ago. Make them understand their place in what they're doing, especially for ongoing series like Marvel and DC have. A lot of people to this day still come in thinking that they want to do XYZ because it's never been done before. Well, the reason it's never been done before is because you can't do XYZ with a company owned character that publishes
Right,
regularly for 70 years, and the company hopes will continue to publish for another 70 years. And you have to understand where what your role is in the telling of stories of established characters in a shared universe of company owned properties.
right. I had a talk with Chuck Dixon, and he was talking about Danny O'Neill, and Danny O'Neill's famous line was, "We are the custodians of these characters, and we have to return them back in the same condition or better, so that the next generation of people could pay their mortgages and pay bills." So that sounds like you had a lot of respect for these characters. Um, it,
Always, yeah. I've been reading comics since 1967,
oh,
and I walked into Marvel with a tremendous respect for the characters that DC and Marvel had, a clear understanding that it's a business and that it's a publishing company and that the company owns the characters and the company would own my stories, and a definite understanding, which was helped and enhanced by people like Danny, Tom DeFalco, Mark Grunwald, the guys who were there on staff. And maybe being on the inside, being an office worker, made a big difference in my understanding my role as a writer, because often writers, freelancers, are on the outside looking in to the company's inner workings. They
I
don't know
gotcha.
them, they don't understand them, so they're at odds with them. I was on the inside already, so I understood all of that stuff. Um, I just had an innate understanding of what my responsibility was to the stories I was telling, to the readers, to the characters, to my fellow coworkers, my editors, everything. Um, and granted, the truth is, not all writers do, not all artists do.
Right,
Um, and I understand why that's the case. But I walked into it feeling that way from the very beginning. And actually, one of the reasons I felt so comfortable and at home when I was on staff at Marvel is because the totality of the company, for the most part, was made up of like-minded people who thought the same way. Understood their responsibility to the characters and to their readers and to the audience, and often made choices that we knew there were some readers may not like, but understanding why we had to do that as part of the publishing cycle and part of keeping characters fresh. The other thing, you were like Denny O'Neill said about the custodians, which is an absolutely true and an intelligent thing to say, which makes a lot of sense because Denny was an incredibly intelligent guy. The other aspect. Oh crap! I just lost my train of thought. I totally forgot what I was going to say. I'm not kidding. I had something else I wanted to say
okay. I do the same thing. Sometimes I'm just
regarded that.
keeps talking because I don't remember what I was going to say.
Oh, I got it. I got it. Now it came back. It came back.
Okay, there
One of
you
the
go.
one of the most important things with Marvel and DC characters, which a lot of readers misinterpret, and a lot of creators misinterpret too, quite frankly, is understanding that when you're telling monthly stories, when you're writing a book, if I'm writing Spider-Man and I'm writing a monthly, whether it's for a year or 3 years or like Dan Slott, 72 years, no matter what,
You
you
just made me
you
laugh.
you are responsible to create the illusion of change.
Right,
It
the
it
illusion
it,
of change.
it is Charlie Brown but not necessarily Charlie Brown not ever leaving elementary school. You know what I mean?
Right. Because nobody
But
wants to read about an 89-year-old Peter Parker.
well, unfortunately, some readers think they do because they're going to be 89 and still reading Spider-Man
You
comics
know,
for crying out
that,
loud, and
yeah.
they've been
Come
reading
on,
them since they
Batman,
were
get
12
your
years
walker.
old.
We're gonna go fight
Um,
crime now.
but the illusion of change is in its own way much harder to do than actually changing something,
Right,
because
right,
actually changing something is always temporary and always very facile and very self-indulgent, because inevitably you may have to change it back because
right,
you need to maintain that cycle of the character's existence. So the
right.
characters should age, but the characters should age at an incredibly decelerated rate.
Right.
We had a really good system in place back when I was there. I think that's all gone to crap now, but we had a really good system in place where whether it's apocryphal or not, we followed what we thought was John Burns' rule,
I was
and
just
John
about to say that.
and
Yeah.
what we were told John Burns' rule was 7 years of real time equals 1 year of the character's life.
Right.
So
Yep.
so from 1963 to 1970, technically 1 year of Peter Parker's life happened. Now, granted, you can claim, oh, but he graduated high school and he was in college. Yes, because back then they were just starting the books out and they didn't know how long they were going to last. So maybe in hindsight, they wouldn't have accelerated that as quickly as they did, right?
Right.
But by the mid to late 80s, we understood the 7-to-1 rule, and the irony being that in 1993, Fantastic Four was 30 years old. With a 7-to-1 rule, that meant that they'd been the FF for 4 years, you know, and now it's 30 years later
Right.
with the
I'm
seven to
just
one
smiling.
rule.
I'm smiling with me ear to ear because this is the geekiest comic book conversation I've had in 20 years, and I'm loving every second of it. Talking about the 7-to-1 year
Yeah,
rules.
and but the truth
Awesome.
of the matter is, if you follow that rule, you're fine. Your characters are
Right.
fine. They evolve and they grow slowly, slower than some of the audience's preferences might be. Certainly slower than the real passing of time in the real world, but they still incrementally increase at a understandable and acceptable rate. Um,
Right.
the writers who throw that out the window are the ones who are never there to have to worry about it later. You know, they're never there down the road to have to clean up the mess they made.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I say it's so self-indulgent to do that. I
Right.
don't
I
know if they
agree with you
follow a seven
100%.
to I don't know if they still follow a 7-to-1 rule. I don't think they do. I don't think they even have given it much thought or care that much one way or the other right now about that kind of stuff. Um, I think they let each individual editorial office and writing group, writers with editors make those decisions, which I think is a mistake because often they make the wrong choice. But you
So
know,
you're a big proponent of like a company wide continuity.
um, I'm a big proponent of understanding these characters exist in a shared universe. I worry less now that I'm older about whether if a character sneezes in book A, does the character in book B
Yeah.
have to say
Yeah.
Gesundheit? I don't worry as much about that anymore. I was I was I was at the side of Mark Grunwald for many years working in the office, and there was no one who was more slavishly devoted to continuity than he was. I didn't always agree with him. I didn't always think it was the smartest thing to do or to worry about. I didn't think it was a great idea to create stories just to explain other stories or to correct mistakes of other stories.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but I don't. So I am of two minds with continuity. I'm a proponent of continuity within reason. I like continuity that helps me tell new stories. I don't necessarily anymore like continuity that explains old
Well,
stories. But
continuity for the sake of continuity is kind of
yeah,
dull. It,
but for the same token, there's plenty of Marvel editors, including a former Marvel president, who really misunderstood that. I can use continuity to tell a new story with characters that is based on their previous continuity. That's just their history. That's
right.
just who they are. If they encountered each other in the past, or if one knows the other did something in the past that they don't agree with now in the present, there you can tell a story with that. So is it a story that is related to continuity? Yes. Is it a story that can't exist without continuity, the answer should be no. It should, it should be a story that can exist without continuity. It's just that the histories of the characters can help inform you as to the decisions they make
Right.
now and the conflicts they face now. And that's how I like to use continuity.
Like the example I always give was I'm a big fan of Roy Thomas, and I'm not trying to hurt his feelings, but he made a comic called The Young All Stars for DC.
Yep, I
That was
remember
just
that.
there. I like the comic. It's great artwork by Michael Baer, but the whole comic's purpose was to fix continuity, and I just felt it was doomed from the beginning because just
Yeah, and it was, and I respect Roy tremendously,
yes,
but
yes,
but he fell too far into the trap of 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 referencing his continuity as the reason for the stories, like you just said.
yeah.
And
He
and
wrote
in
a whole
his
comic about why Namor's pants are now green instead of
yeah,
black.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But the other side of the coin, and this is in Roy's defense,
Oh, I love Roy. I'm not trying to
he
hurt his
was he was done really dirty by DC's editorial decisions during the crisis, where they changed their minds as to how his book was going to be set and what characters he had were going to be set in their new continuity, because they were making up that way too much of that stuff as they were going along.
Yeah,
So Roy's retro corner of the DC universe really got screwed. So
yeah, yeah.
he
His
found
stuff.
himself in a position where he had to try to he thought he had to try to find a way to reestablish his own continuity in a world where the old continuity didn't work anymore. So I don't envy what he thought he had to
Yeah,
do. I do question why he thought he had to do it. You know what I mean? Like you
yeah,
said, there you could have moved on with the stories you were telling. And look, I wasn't a big fan of Young All Stars, but I was a huge fan of All Star Squadron.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I
What a good
love
comic.
that. I love that book, and I love the
There's something
Justice
about
Society.
superheroes in World War II that just goes together like chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah, yeah, Roy did a great job with that
Yeah,
book, but yeah, look, it's easy when you have Jerry Ordway doing doing your artwork too, for crying
yeah,
out loud. So anyway, I never thought of continuity as my enemy. I also don't think of it as my security blanket. I'm willing to tell a story that if I think it's worth it and good, I don't care if a reader says, but in issue 17 of Namor in 1968, he said this. I'm gonna be like, yeah, okay, whatever. He was wrong. I was like, whatever. He had amnesia. I don't know. Leave me alone.
it was the mind control. Yeah, it
Yeah,
causes problems. Yeah.
yeah. It was being mind controlled by the electric eel. That's what it was. Yeah, there you
So I always try to keep these an hour because it's better to end on a high note than talk for 3 hours and then everybody's bored. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that the comic book landscape is changing now? We got like crowdfunded comics, and are you interested in venturing into that arena?
Yeah, I think that landscape has changed quite dramatically in a good way for the most part. I think it's great that the creators can find the financial resources to enough of a living, let's hope, and get to tell stories they want to tell. I worry that it starts to become incredibly microscopically
It's
targeted.
Yeah,
Like
we're
like
tiny.
you get 175 backers for a book, and that pays your ability to produce the book, let's say. But that means 175 people are reading your comic, and those numbers are unfathomable to me. I don't get that.
Well,
Um,
in full disclosure, I'm in a couple of months. I want to be doing my own comic book, and I agree with you. If I find out only 175 people bought my comics, I'm not going to be happy. I don't care how much money I made.
but yeah, but you're not thinking
It,
of it that way, though. You're thinking of it. The people who are doing it are thinking of it as, yes, they want to earn enough money to make a living. Of course, we all do, but
right,
they're looking at it as, I want a chance to create this comic, and this is the only way I'll get that chance to create this comic, um, in a way that I can afford to create this
right.
comic. And the amount of people reading it is secondary to the ability to express yourself creatively
Well,
and
my goal
earn enough money that you can do so.
my
And
goal is I
I
want little
back
kids
stuff.
arguing if I want little kids arguing if my characters could beat Spider-Man. That's you know
Yeah,
what I
but
mean.
you're not gonna do. You're never gonna
I
get
know, I
that
know, I know.
through
But
a
that's I
Kickstarter
can
campaign.
dream.
That's not the way it's gonna work.
I know.
Uh,
Because we all know
you know, you
Spider-Man's gonna win. Let's see
worry first about getting stuff out there and getting a body of work that people can have an opinion on before you worry about getting mass opinions. um, it start. I just feel like it is a different landscape. I don't know. I don't. It's so much work to me that I'm working on an image book right now with Kurt Busiek and Stephen Mooney. It's coming out next year. It's been so long in the making, and it feels like the real hard work hasn't even started yet. And that's getting it out, getting it together for selling it, soliciting it, marketing it. I'm too old. I'm turning 62 years old in a month. I don't have the
Oh, happy
bandwidth or
birthday.
the energy
We're both
anymore
December babies, huh?
to think about all that. Yeah, it just seems like so much work. Kickstarter campaigns seem like so much work to me. We did the Outrage, the digital comic that I did with Riley Brown, Outrage. We did Rocket Ship Entertainment, who does a great job with Kickstarter campaigns, and they do gorgeous packaged books. They did the Outrage book for us. And they did a great job, and I don't think it sold I don't think we had enough backers to make anyone a lot of money, but we had enough backers, more than enough backers, to produce a beautiful book. But ultimately, I worry that it's shouting in an empty room. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, I
if a
worry about
tree
that too.
if a
I
tree
can't
falls and
agree
there's
with you.
no one there to hear it, did it make a sound? Like
So do you think crowdfunding has legs? Do you think this is just a fad? Do you think this is the future, or you know?
I don't have an answer to that, and the main
Fair
reason I don't
enough.
have an
Fair
answer
enough.
to that is because I don't think about it enough, and I haven't done it myself, so I don't know whether it's the future or not, because I do know that it takes a lot of work to do a Kickstarter campaign, right? To do it well,
Right,
to be
yeah.
successful
I
at
don't.
it
I'm at
takes
that
a
point where I don't
tremendous
even
amount of
know what
work.
I don't know yet. You know. So
Yeah, and the people who do it regularly, it's a full-time job just to do that. You
right.
know, I I I I'm working on my third novel right now. I don't have the time to think about a Kickstarter. You know,
Fair enough.
I
Yeah.
just it's just so I don't know that it's the future or not the future. If an entire well, let me tell you, it'll be the future of an entire cycle generation of comic book creators begins to consider that as their primary outlet for their creativity, then it's going to be the future, because then an entire generation of creative talent will be angling towards that,
Okay.
and we'll have an entire level of readership. And we're starting to get that now, quite honestly. An entire portion of the readership of comics is reading them through Kickstarter campaigns. They're following the creators they like to look at the things they want to get and getting it, right.
Right.
That I pledge to a bunch of them, and I got to be honest with you, I pledge a lot less because I'm interested in reading the book as I am in supporting friends of mine. You know what I mean? So I end up
Yeah. Yeah. I
pledging for
understand.
stuff that I don't. I've had stuff drop into my inbox, and I haven't even read it yet because it's on my laptop, not my iPad. So I can't even think about reading on my laptop. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So it's all stupid stuff like that. So to me, it's not what I'm looking for to read stuff. Although I'm really, really happy that I can support Jeff Johnson and he gets the book out with James Robinson that he's doing. I'm really, really happy that I can support Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor, because they got an entire business around this stuff,
Yeah.
and
I back them. I
good for
back
them. I applaud
Nicieza.
their effort
Yeah.
tremendously. You know what I mean? And they're getting to tell the kinds of stories that they're not able to tell through Marvel, DC, or even through Image. It's not necessarily the right place to be telling those kinds of stories. So, if it works out that way, that's wonderful. Excuse me.
Bless you. Oh, my cough went through the screen to you. I apologize. I'll drink some coffee with you.
Hmm. That's a water,
Yeah.
plain old agua.
Yeah. I wake up at 4 in the morning. I got chug coffee to stay awake. So is there anything you wanna bring up? Anything that I haven't covered? Anything that you feel like we should talk about that I didn't
I just
mention?
wanted anybody who's listening, go buy Cable #1 in January
Oh yeah,
by me
absolutely.
and Scott Eaton and Cam Smith. It looks phenomenal. I wish I could show you. I don't think I can show you on screen. Can I? Can I show you? Share screen?
Yeah. Just be careful what you're putting up there, because we're gonna.
No, I'm putting up a page from the book. Share.
Shit. There you
Is
go.
it
Oh, you did it.
sharing?
You're better than me. It took me so long to
Can
figure
you
this
see
out.
it? Oh, I don't want that. I don't want to share the whole screen. I just wanted to share that image right there, and I can't do it. All right, well, let's get.
Do you want me to remove this? Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's okay. I was trying to show you some art from the issue.
That looked good. What I saw. That looked.
Scott and Cam are doing a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
It looks great. I have a giant size FF #1 comes out in February. The lead story is not giant size, and it features a new character that is based on the most obvious, ridiculous idea that I think I've ever had in 35 years of comic book writing, which is, and I'm sure that there's a Namor fan out there who will contradict me and tell me I'm wrong, but it's too late. I don't care. I already scripted the issue. Namor's been shouting Imperius Rex forever. Imperius Rex in Latin means the eternal king. What if that shout is based on an actual former king that existed in Atlantean history?
Awesome. That
And
is
what
awesome.
what if he is still alive today?
Well, he's eternal. He's got to be alive. It's in the name.
So the character, he's not called Imperius Rex. He's actually called Natlus, which is Sultan backwards. And if Namor could be Roman backwards, which is what Bill Everett did, then I could do Sultan backwards, and it's Natlus. And it's a character that awakens from an imposed dormancy, and he wants to rule Atlantis again, except in current continuity there is really no Atlantis anymore, and Namor's in prison, and he has to decide what he's going to do next when the people that he once led are no longer a people. So whether they ever want to do anything with him or not, I don't know. It worked really well for a self-contained single issue. I really liked it. I always like to get to write the
Well, you got
FF.
me excited, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about continuity. Continuity gave you a great idea for a comic and a character that's exciting. You know what I mean? It's not just, you 30 years or 40 years or 50 years of history, Namor's been saying this, and now you made a comic out of it because that's continuity. That's excellent. That is. Yeah. I'm actually like geeking out right now. I think that's.
Yeah, I hope it's good. I haven't seen any of the artwork yet. I haven't seen any art yet, so I can't say. We'll see. But that comes out in February, and then probably May or June will be the image book I'm doing with Kurt Busiek, and Stephen Mooney is drawing it. It's called Free Agents, and it's basically a squad of interdimensional soldiers that have been fighting pretty much their entire lives, and during one of their biggest battles they ended up becoming stranded on Earth. So they are on Earth now, removed from the wars that they've been fighting their entire lives, basically wars they were all born into, and thinking maybe they have an opportunity to start a new life here on Earth. But complications ensue.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, and that'll be out. It's called Free Agents, and it'll be out probably May or June of next year.
Now, if you don't mind, I'll ask you a serious question, and you could nope out if you want. But I was the world's biggest Kurt Busiek fan. I love him, and matter of fact, he joined my forum like in 2001 when I had like 35 people, and now I go to invite him on my channel, and I'm blocked. And I'm sure it's some sort of political thing that I don't understand, but I'm a big fan of this guy. Now, do you think this is good for comic books, that all this political infighting?
I don't think it's political infighting at all. I look, we will.
And I don't know. I'm guessing.
We could easily agree to disagree. You might have gotten caught up in a chain block, which I hear happens a lot.
Right. That's all I can think of.
And if you got if you got caught up in a chain block, it could be because you were following someone that he's blocking or something like that. I don't even know the ins and outs.
That's yeah, I'm guessing too.
I think calling it politics is has become the cheapest way to avoid the obvious. And the
Okay,
obvious is no one likes an asshole. And people are tired of assholes. And everyone has a different definition of what an asshole is. One side thinks you're an asshole if you believe in A, B, and C. And the other
absolutely.
side thinks you're an asshole if you believe in E, F, and G. Okay. I just call assholes by the smell of them. If I don't like your smell, then I'm
Well, that's
blocking you.
just it. Is
And
I never interacted with them on Twitter, and now
if you say something incredibly stupid, mean-spirited, aggressive, misogynistic, anti-LGBTQ, if you do any of that stuff, I'm going to block your ass because I don't have a minute of time to spend on that in my life. I'm
well,
done with that.
well,
So
that's what I'm
if
saying. I
you
got
get
no problem with
blocked,
that.
if you got blocked, it's John put it this way: if you got blocked by Kurt, it's either something you said or something someone else said that you are somehow attached to. I don't believe that people should be guilty by association,
Well, that's
but
my point. Yeah.
these social media channels don't discriminate for that. They don't make it easy for that. We can't
Right.
go through 1,000 followers. I have 15,000 followers on Twitter. Kurt has 30,000 followers. You can't go through your whole list and figure out
I know. I'm
who
just saying, don't you
who's
think that would
interested,
hurt the
who's
industry?
not.
Like,
I
because
don't give
I
a
find it
crap,
hard.
John.
I
I don't
find it
give a
hard to buy
crap
a
if it
comic
hurts
by
the
him.
industry. I don't give a crap.
I know.
I
I
don't.
know.
I'm so tired of readers who say you don't want me as a reader. You're going to hurt the industry. I don't want you as a reader, not because I want to hurt the industry. I don't want you as a reader because you're an ass, and I'm done with asses. If you don't get what I've been about for 35 years, if you don't get what my writing has said for 35 years, if you're so childishly immature as to think your own single individual personal opinion has to matter in the greater scope of the opinions of thousands of other people, uh, in terms of in regarding to anything in life, if you're that self-centered or that insecure, I don't have time for you. I can't speak for Kurt. I can't speak
Well,
for Ron Mars. I can't
believe me, I'm
speak
not
for
asking you to
anybody.
speak for Kurt.
I can
I'm
only
just
speak for me.
right.
I've become so quick to block anyone's ass. Actually, I tend to mute more than block. I like muting because they can shout at me and I won't hear them, and I like that. I, I enjoy when I enjoy when they're shouting into a void. But I just don't have time for it anymore. And sometimes I engage in playful banter. I just did with someone on Twitter like a day or two ago. He's trying to insult me, and it's like, it's seriously, you really think you're going to be
Well,
able to insult me? You know,
that's a some jerk personally. Yeah, I got no problems with that. Telling some ass to that's starting a fight. I got no time for that either. I'm 55 years old. I got to go to bed early. You know what I mean? I don't want to be up fight with asses on the Twitter. I agree with you 100%. I just say like I tried to interact with the creator that I truly love, that we had a personal relationship with at one point, and then I get Twitter and I find out that I'm blocked when I didn't interact with this person, and maybe I am
well,
immature,
John,
and I'm not asking you to
no, John, look,
apologize.
like I said,
And
it's either something you said that an individual took offense to, and you may not realize what you said, or you're just caught up in someone else's chain, and
right,
that's happened to a lot of people. I haven't done any
you don't
chain
think that
blocks.
because I know so many people who just like, well, I can't buy it because like right now I have a hard time buying anything by Kurt Piasek because you don't want me, then I don't want you. And I know that's a drop in the bucket as far as sales. I'm not that arrogant that I'm going to make a difference. The guy's a phenomenal writer and he's a super talented guy and I wish him well. But I can't help but take it personally. And I just wish
Look,
he would tell
I
me
mean,
what did I do wrong.
I'll take a step back, John. I totally understand what you're saying. I get it. Okay. Conversely, though, I can throw out something else. you can choose to not take it personally if you want to.
Yeah,
You
absolutely,
can
absolutely.
choose to
Well,
still
this other guy,
enjoy the
Ben
work.
Slot blocked
You
me, but
can enjoy
I
the
was never
comic.
friendly with him. So,
You know, if
big
Kurt
deal.
writes something that it has a good artist and you like Kurt's writing and you like the artist, you can read that book without needing to be attached to him through social media. You know what I mean? You can.
Believe me,
You know
I
why?
don't want you
No,
to
you
think I'm some
can.
sort of
I know
stalker
you can
or
because
anything like
I
that.
know
No,
you can
that's
do
not
it because
that.
you did it for 50 years, right? You read comics for years and years before you had that kind of interaction. I think that a lot of readers have an incredibly I want to say it right. I don't want it to sound insulting because I don't mean it that way. A lot of readers, as a result of social media, have an incredibly unrealistic expectation
Oh,
of
I agree
what
with that.
their connection is to the people doing the creative work, and what what the extent of their voice is or even should be in that conversation. You know, I just I feel social media. I love it. I get engaged in it. I have fun with it. I don't ever take it too seriously. I don't take
Pardon me.
criticism too seriously. I learned lessons a really long time ago that have stuck with me forever. And those lessons are to take each individual's opinion with a grain of salt, or even better, a grain of sand. And there's lots of grains of sand on the beach. And some of them are going to be agree, and some of them aren't going to agree, and go on from there. I had a guy wait in line for almost 2 hours at San Diego Comic Con in 1992 just to tell me I sucked. Okay,
Oh,
he didn't even want to have anything signed. He just wanted to tell me I sucked, and he waited for almost 2 hours because that's how long the line was.
that's
I, I had I had no problem with this guy doing that. More power to you. If you care that much that you want to wait 2 hours to tell
that
me I
is.
suck,
Uh,
that's fine. It didn't infringe on my day in the least. You know,
I've met comic book creators that I couldn't stand their comics, but they were so nice and everything. The last thing I want to do is to, like, hey, shake hands, buy something from, you know what I mean? I didn't particularly like your material, but you were a great guy. Why would you tell them they sucked? I don't know. That to me is
but look, conversely, there's lots of comic books I like that are done by people I don't like. You know,
I got a lot of records by musicians who I can't stand.
yeah, I'm not a huge fan of who Woody Allen is anymore, but I still
Yeah,
think Crimes and Misdemeanors is one of the best
you just hit
movies
the
I've
nail on
ever
the head there.
seen.
I
You know
still
what I
I
mean?
still love those.
I put all that in perspective. And part of that is being within the industry, being in the office. I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to meet I got to meet people who lived up to every standard I wished they were, and I got to meet people who lived up to every expectation I had of them in a negative way. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And I learned how to balance all of that. And you're gonna get me. You can get me on a good day at a convention more often than not. But guess what? You may get me on a bad day. You may get me when I'm not feeling good. You may get me when I just had diarrhea that morning and I have to go sit at the booth for 2 hours. You got to take all of that into account. You got to have context to all of it. You know, you
Yeah.
may have a negative social interaction with someone on social media. That's not the sum total of either of you. You know what I
Right.
mean? That
Yeah.
it's just a part
Yeah.
and parcel of the day, you know. But to me, the line that gets crossed is when readers say you can't be reading it, you can't be writing it, you can't be saying that, you can't be telling that story, you can't. The minute it has become a proprietary ownership from a perceptual standpoint of characters, of content, of continuity, and of potential. And there is absolutely a man boy audience of aggrieved 40, 50-year olds who feel so possessive about this stuff because they were reading it when they were 12 years old. Okay, guess what? You were reading the books I wrote when you were 12 years old. And I'm sitting here telling you it's okay for other people to have voices, for other people to have points of view on a character. I may not even agree with all of them. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be attempted. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be
Oh,
told.
I'm not
That doesn't
arguing that. Yeah, not at all. You know,
Oh, but
I'm
there
not.
are plenty of people,
Well,
John, who
yeah,
are. I'm not
there's
saying
yeah,
you.
yeah,
This isn't
there's
about you.
individuals.
This is
Yeah,
about in
there's
whole.
people
You
on
know,
all sides of the spectrum that are complaining for some valid reasons, some crazy reasons. You know, I just think you know, again, I just brought it up because my personal feelings got hurt by a guy that I thought I loved his work. I wanted to tell him. I got on Twitter to say, you know, you were somebody who made my life better. And do you remember me? We interacted, and I'm blocked because, and it's nothing individual that I did. I'm talking about this is my first week on Twitter, so I never said anything. You know, I'm probably following somebody that he doesn't like. And again, I'm not asking you
and
to.
I'm sorry for that, John. But
I
look, I'm mad at him
I
because
just find that that's weird.
I'm mad at him because he's noodling on this damn logo to the death of all of us, and I just want to get the damn logo done. So
Well,
that's
he's a talented guy,
I'm
and
gonna
he's
block him. I'm gonna block him now.
don't block him. Just tell
He's
him
not gonna be able to email
as
me because
fans
I'm
and you
gonna
hurt their
block him.
feelings, and you know I still buy his stuff. You know, Aerosmith is wonderful. Oh my God, is that such a good comic? You know, Astro City. I wish that would still come out. What a great comic! And his run on Avengers. Oh, chef's kiss. You know,
Thunderbolts. First
yes,
year of
he did
Thunderbolts.
Thunderbolts. I forgot about that. Yes, you're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
yeah. No, he's
Okay,
Kurt's a good writer. There you go.
yeah, he's in the upper echelons. He's in the elite of writers. I love the guy. Um, all right. Anything else I want to talk about? We
No,
went
I
over
am
half.
good.
Oh, man, you were easy to talk to. You did all the hard work.
Buy my
Buddy.
two
Thank you.
books. If you want to try something different, buy Suburban Dicks and The Self-Made Widow, my first two novels from Putnam Publishing. They are available where all books are sold. You can look them up online just by looking up Fabian Nicieza plus novels because they're actual real books by a real publisher.
Yep.
And I'm pretty proud of both of them, and I'm working on a third book now.
Oh, good for you.
Hopefully I'll find a landing place for that one. Hopefully my agent will be able to sell that one soon. I'm enjoying writing prose quite a lot because it took me 25, 30 years to get to a point where I didn't think it sucked. And then it went beyond that. It went beyond my wildest dreams because not only did it not suck, it had multiple publishers wanting to buy the manuscript and all this stuff.
Wow.
So it was really a fun roller coaster ride. Going from ridiculous insecurity about my own prose to now being so high-handed and arrogant about it has just been wonderful.
That's what my writing teacher said. If you want to be a writer, you got to be a little arrogant.
And it's funny, I'm not about my comic stuff, but I am certainly, like I said earlier, I'm certainly a little arrogant about my prose right now. Go figure, considering for 30 years I was so scared and insecure about it.
Well, you're a good writer, and you know you're one of the legends in comic book history. You know, you deserve a little bit of arrogance. You earned it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for coming on my channel. This was
my
a pleasure,
John. It was a really fun conversation.
But you know, I'm a big fanboy. I'm so happy I pronounced your name correctly. I was worried about that for a week, but thank you so much for coming.
You did a great job. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. We'll do it again. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.